Welcome to War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast, coming to you every week from deep within the Outer Rim, far beyond the watchful ice of the Galactic Empire. Join your hosts, John Mark Tolley, Garrett K. Jones, and Brian Karasik, as they discuss the various facets of the saga's lore, characters, review the films, and discuss every tidbit of news coming out of Lucasfilm. And remember, this isn't just my Star Wars, this isn't just your Star Wars, this is our Star Wars.
And we are back once again with another episode of War of the Stars, a Star Wars podcast. And our resident Imperial is back from his fact-finding mission, I'm sure, to discover all the rebel secrets that the rebels have been hiding. But no, Brian, we are glad to have you back once again here on War of the Stars. We missed you, buddy. But yeah, it's always good. And we're talking Empire Strikes Back today.
So, I'm not sure if he's staring us down. Oh, wait.
No, he's not. Ugh.
That's no Ring of Death. That's a space station.
All right, tweaking. Everything's good here. How about you?
Oh, good. Everything's good. Good. It's we actually had temperatures over 40 degrees here today, which was
we hit 53, I think, at the highest. We had rain last night out of the blue, and It was I know, it was crazy. Like, I wasn't expecting it, but it was a nice break because then everything wasn't freezing and turned to ice.
Yeah.
So that was good. But fun story. I was house sitting for my parents this weekend, and they left to go up to Reno to visit my brother. And they were not anticipating any storms or anything while they're up there. Weather said everything was going to be clear. Keeping in mind that weather people are usually the first ones to be surprised when the weather changes. And so they got snowed in. They were supposed to come back yesterday. They ended up coming back today, and they were worried about not having the right tires or needing chains and stuff like that. So they contacted the Audi dealership up in Reno, and come to find out that not only do they have all-weather tires, they also have, are you ready for this? It's an Audi Q7 with Quattro, which means it has four-wheel drive. They could have driven down yesterday.
Oh. So I do have one question, though. When they're in Reno, did they shoot a man just to watch him die?
Not that I'm aware of,
okay.
But
I'm just wondering.
Given the fact that my dad's a lawyer, he probably won't. He'll probably plead the fifth.
That makes
himself.
that makes sense. Yeah. No, we are not here to talk about songs from The Man in Black or anything like that. We are here to talk Empire Strikes Back, our review, and just talking off camera. I think we're going to get a interesting hot take from one Brian Karasik when it comes to this movie.
I want to hear what he has to say because his hero shows up for the first time in this film.
Well,
floor is yours, Brian.
I will say that I know my opinion on this is objectively wrong, but prior to the sequels coming out, this was my second least favorite Star Wars movie. I can't get into it. So the Battle on Hoth is exciting. I like the Wampa effect, although I do notice it sort of follows in what I call the monkey effect. It is really hard to find an animal with a snout in Star Wars. They love putting like flat monkey faces on everything, including the horses. But once they leave Hoth and they're on the way to Bespin and on the way to Dagobah, just kills me. Wake me up when we're back at Bespin. The whole Yoda training scene takes me right out of it. I don't care for the characterization of Yoda. It's his initial introduction. I don't know what they're going for. If they're like, he's trying to like put Luke at ease by acting like a complete goofball, but I made a meme about it. I took this like heavenly wise face picture of Yoda where he's staring meaningfully into the middle distance. And the quote I put on it was mine, 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 mine. Grandmaster Yoda. You know, like it's not the character that I wanted to see him be. It's just I don't have a lot of specifics. It just doesn't really grab me. I do really like the scene where, and this was, as you might imagine, a pivotal moment for me in my childhood when we see the Emperor and we learn that, as I put it, my hero, my gigantic cyborg Death Knight, has a boss who is an evil wizard. And I'm like, that's who I'm dressing up as, because as I say, I know what I'm working with, guys. If I'm going to be wearing a costume, I'm way more to the evil wizard side of the spectrum than I am giant warrior. So
Now,
I do like that moment.
Go ahead. Finish. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You can finish.
I was just going to say I like Clive Rebel's read of it. I got to say I do prefer the special edition when they put McDiarmid in. But regardless of who's reading it, I was glad to see the Emperor. I do really like the lightsaber fight at the end with Luke and Vader, but it's a long movie to get to a 10-minute lightsaber duel.
Yeah, and that does bring up an interesting point. Would we, if you didn't have the big reveal of, I am your father, that whole thing, would Star Wars fans still hold Empire in such high regards? Is this a movie that we look at because of that scene? That was the big shock, the big reveal, because there is a lot of downtime in this movie. I think that's what Brian is kind of getting at. There's a lot of time where it's just maybe just character development, just where there's not a lot of action. Whereas with A New Hope, it was just boom, 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 boom. You start with action and it just goes straight through, where it's just you're constantly moving, and stuff is constantly happening. Whereas with Empire, you have a lot of time where these characters aren't really doing much of anything other than going from point A to point B. And until you get, like, you start with Hoth, like you said, and then you get to Bespin, and everything in between is just these characters getting from point A to point B.
From a storytelling perspective, I think the reveal strengthens the storytelling because it gives us a pivotal bit of backstory for Vader that you don't have prior to that point.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that I find. I think that's a good question, because I have noticed that, and I hope I stir some conversation in the audience there. But I have noticed that many of the things people hate the most about Last Jedi, they completely excuse in Empire Strikes Back.
What do you mean?
People are mad about, for example, the science of so when the rebels, or I guess not just Last Jedi, but when the Resistance is bombing the First Order flagship, I saw a lot of people really upset that bombs fall in space. Okay, so let's talk about the atmosphere when they are parked inside of the sand slug.
And they're dropping the bombs.
Empire is really good for people were right, and but I mean I'm okay with that, because as I put it, we are perfectly happy to accept that every spaceship in Star Wars has a perfect 1.0 Earth gravity, all aligned in the same direction, no matter where the ship is. So if we take that into account, we have a long, tall, cylindrical ship full of bombs. Okay, so there's gravity on the ship. We drop the bombs. When it leaves the ship, they are still moving. There's no brakes. So even as they leave the gravity field of the ship, they retain the momentum from inside the ship, and they are pushed by the rest of the bombs coming out of there. So people get real picky about the science of Star Wars with the sequels, but look at Empire with their breathing and the wait, I guess the space slug is episode 4, but
no, the space slug is episode 5.
Okay, thank you. I saw a lot of people very upset that we didn't learn how Vader or how Kylo Ren became evil in Last Jedi. We didn't learn about Snoke's origin. And, we were fine with that in Empire. And one thing I was really disappointed in our fandom is how many people wanted Rey to be Luke's daughter or some kind of relative. And it comes back to that Vader reveal when he says, "No, I'm your father." I'm like, guys, did we hate that surprise so much that we never ever want to be surprised again? Like, hey, I get that it's a good movie, but do we have to see it the same movie over again? Like the reveal of Luke telling Rey, "No, I'm your father." It would have been a nice, maybe a nice circular storytelling, but it's. I feel like it would lose some. It lacks imagination.
So, with regards to the bombing thing, I kind of excused it. While the physics don't necessarily pan out, like the way I kind of explain it with something similar, where they use some kind of like electromagnetic, push, like you would see with like a roller coaster or something, but just low momentum, where you can just nudge it out just enough where it would continue on a particular trajectory. I'm totally okay with that. As far as the thing with Rey not being Luke's daughter, actually, I like the idea that they went with a complete nobody. That made
I wish they would have stuck with that.
I'm very glad. In fact, that would have been better if they had not made her a Palpatine.
Agreed.
Because her having no ties to any legacy characters would have been great. You already have a character with ties to a legacy character in Kylo Ren. We don't need another one.
Yeah.
What we needed, and this is, I think, the problem that I think falls into what happens with The Last Jedi, is that, and even the other two sequel films that bookend it, is that we start off with a film that is done by J.J. Abrams, and J.J. Abrams is always about that mystery box. What's in the mystery box? He asks the question, but never comes to an answer, and that becomes unfulfilling for the audience. Lucas never did that. Irvin Kershner never did that. So we had good, solid storytelling within that. Then we get Applehead, Rian Johnson, who decides that he's going to subvert all expectations. And while subverting expectations worked in a film like Knives Out that he wrote and directed, and I love Knives Out, even though the giveaway is seen a mile away from it, it doesn't work in the Last Jedi. In fact, Nerdstalgic did a video on this just about a month and a half ago. And it's a really, really informative insight into how it worked for Knives Out and how that subversion doesn't work for Last Jedi. But then we get The Rise of Skywalker, which they had to completely backpedal on because it was supposed to be Colin Trevorrow who was directing that. It had a completely different story that was supposed to pick up on the tail end of what happened with Last Jedi. And unfortunately, we didn't get that. We got J.J. Abrams back in the saddle doing what he does, all spectacle with no good story. And he had to pivot off of the backlash that came from The Last Jedi. Even if The Last Jedi had been as poorly received as it was by fans, they still could have executed what happened with Colin Trevorrow, because at least then the stories would have lined up. The problem is, even J.J. Abrams has said this, they went into the sequel trilogy without having a plan to get from point A to point B. They did not write with the ending in mind. And when you're working on a large scale, long form storytelling platform like that, that's where it suffers. You
have to be George Lucas who can pull that off.
Right. Well, and even then, George Lucas had multiple versions of how the story could end for the original trilogy based on how things went. I mean, the reason why Han Solo was even frozen in carbonite was simply because of contract disputes. And he literally and figuratively froze the character of Han Solo depending on how things played off.
Right.
Yeah. The character, and he could still do marketing and licensing and product placement.
That is something I do like about Empire Strikes Back, is it ends on a pretty deep down note.
And that's what makes it so strong as a story.
Yeah, it's the second in a trilogy, and they have to, because we have to have some place to come back from. But I agree.
Going back to the the whole thing with the physics. Anytime anybody complains about like physics or real life physics in Star Wars, I just remind them this is a franchise where there are space wizards with laser swords. I don't
thank
think we
you.
need to worry about physics.
But if we're going to be picky about it, I think it makes sense to reiterate. You have a long tube that has gravity. You drop a bomb from the top of it, it will maintain its inertia when it goes down there. It's disappointing. But to keep it back on Empire,
Right.
I love the AT-ATs. The introduction of the AT-AT,
Yes.
however you pronounce it, is one of my favorite moments. Family Guy did a funny bit about it on their Star Wars cartoon, but it's one of my favorite vehicles. And the TIE pilot, that cool like white outfit, or not TIE pilot. So the AT-AT pilot was one of my favorite like troop figures. I love that, and the Scout Trooper. So I think it was I think it is a good movie, but I am famous for falling asleep as soon as they leave Hoth and waking up on the edge of Bespin.
I'll be honest, I've watched it so many times that I kind of fall asleep at the same point, only because it is I think the pacing in that portion of the film is a little down because they want to kind of protract it so you get, because like if the way it plays out, it for us, if you're watching the film, it feels like only a couple of days have passed between the time they leave Hoth and the time that they reconnect on Bespin at Cloud City. It's actually much longer than that. It's like several weeks. And it's hard
and even that's short.
Big issue.
If I remember right, isn't the warp drive or the warp drive? Isn't the hyperdrive broken on the Falcon when they leave Hoth?
Yeah.
Yes.
So really, they should all die of old age before they reach Bespin. How far is it from Hoth to Bespin? And they're traveling at sublight.
Hold on. Let me find out.
They are close to one another. They're in the same galactic neighborhood, but it's still another star system.
The distance between Hoth and Bespin is they would definitely have been dead from a purely physics perspective, but
right,
1,150 light years apart.
So everybody thinks that's fine. Like we're mad about bombs falling in space, but they somehow travel 1,000 light years at sublight speed, and it takes them a couple weeks. But that said, I also have a hard time getting past the fact that Yoda comes out pretty strong against Luke leaving, and Yoda is, correct me if I'm wrong, but Yoda's prediction of doom and dire and disastrous consequences if Luke leaves, completely wrong. Am I wrong about that? I mean,
it does interrupt Luke's training for the better part of about a year or so.
Yeah.
Because hold on,
but he still ends up in the books more so than we see on the films. But we see him in The Mandalorian. I just rewatched the big reveal of Luke saving Grogu from Moff Gideon last night. In the grand scheme of things, I think Luke ends up pretty okay, despite having, clocked out early. I call it getting his JED.
Yeah, but here's the thing: unfortunately, it's no longer considered canon unless you're like a diehard like I am, because there's nothing really in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. But if you look at what happens in the events of Shadows of the Empire, some bad stuff happens to them. They get into a huge skirmish on Coruscant by the end of it, and they still haven't gotten any closer to finding Han Solo. And it almost results in Prince Shizor, a Thaleen, using his pheromone control abilities to manipulate the crap out of Leia. And the only reason why he didn't get a chance to bed her is because Chewbacca sensed it, came in, and smacked him.
I forgot about him. He's the Orion slave girl of Star Wars. What is it with green aliens and hormone control?
I know, right?
It's green means horny, I guess. I don't know.
I guess.
The one thing I like is with Empire, it's the first time where you really get to see the power of the Force. Like you saw hints of it in A New Hope. You know, you saw the mind control. You saw Vader using the Force choke. But other than that, there were just hints of what you could do. And Empire, I mean, right from the beginning, when Luke is captured by the Wampa, he uses the Force pull to pull the lightsaber to him. You know,
I love that what you just said, Mark, makes me smile about how the Force has been video gamified since the films came out. He used Force pull.
Yeah.
And I was in the first, when the first movies were coming out, the Force was like sort of nebulous, like soft magic. It was like good things happen, go. But then by the time we got to the prequels, there had been so many role-playing games and video games. I wish I was a better videographer. I'd make a cut of Luke trying to get ready for the trench run, and Obi-Wan's voice saying, "Luke, when you leveled up, you put 2 points in Force accuracy. Use Force accuracy. You get a +6 modifier." You know?
Well, I mean, from a video game perspective, it's really not like that. Like, I mean, you do have the Force push and the Force pull, because you see that in other video games as well, but then in other films. But then some of the other abilities are more specific, like Force Lightning, or lightsaber throws, being able to block and using the Force for that. That can, because like, for example, the way that it plays out with the Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor games is that even when you're blocking, you can't just block everything. Like at some point, your Force meter runs down and you leave yourself vulnerable because your concentration's gone.
That Force pull, not to turn this into an entirely sequel defending show, but we have no problem with Luke using the Force to pull a lightsaber to him, right?
Right.
But that's a thing we agree is real. Jedi can do that.
Yes.
Yet, let me touch on the Super Leia scene in Last Jedi. She's doing exactly the same thing. She is using Force pull on a starship. And since she's smaller than the starship, she pulls herself to it. She's not flying. She's just using the same ability. Let me reach out to that thing with the Force, grab it, and pull. And since Leia is not powerful enough to pull a starship off course, she pulls herself to the starship. That's it. And while we're at it, I don't know if you guys saw this, but in that scene when Leia is flying back into the shattered bridge, the hologram of Snoke's ship is still active, and she splits through that hologram at the same point that Holdo hits the ship when she does the hyperspace ram. I thought that was a really cool bit of foreshadowing. But
I think more people, not to get off topic, but I think more people were upset with that scene because, one, she's flying through space in the vacuum of space, and two, she looked like Mary Poppins.
It did. I grant the cinematography was a little lacking.
All she needed was the umbrella.
Not to argue, is the legitimate question. What does the vacuum of space have to do with it? Should she just be dead? Is that the point?
Because at what point does the physics of space and being out in a vacuum affect the human body?
Well, we do know that sound travels through space in Star Wars, so there might be a little bit of oxygen there.
Yeah, I mean, and you could argue that because she had Force training, she was able to use the Force to create a bubble.
And we don't know to what extent she learned that. But to me, when I saw her do that, what I saw was she's using Force pull to pull herself back to the ship. And everyone's like, "Oh, she's flying!" Like, no, she's not flying. Anyway, I hadn't thought of that as far as showing off Force powers. I do think that's one of that is a real advantage.
And you see Vader,
throwing things around.
You see Vader choking somebody, and he's not even in the same room. I mean, he's in completely different. Which is one of my favorite Vader dad joke lines.
Makes
apology accepted, Captain Nita.
Garrett, you played the role-playing games, didn't you?
I did, but keep in mind that was in 1996 and 1997, so it's been a while.
At what point, I wonder, at what point they introduced force choke as being a ranged attack. Like, do you need line of sight or just eye contact, right?
They the way that they incorporate it is you had to have your force abilities up at a certain point, and you could be within line of sight, or you could be within proximal distance. It depended on how strong you were with the force.
I wonder, the techie role-playing game nerd of me, I was like, I wonder if Vader could have choked him if he wasn't on the call, right? Like if the guy had not taken the call or just turned off the camera, would that have worked? But that reminds me of one of my favorite moves that Ezra Bridger pulls in the Rebels series is Ezra uses force mind control at a range of about 100 yards and causes an Imperial crew to commit suicide. And we never see that happen before or since. Ezra Bridger's the only one who's ever done that.
Well, the other thing I've always wondered with any force ability like that, whether it be pulling an object, pushing an object, choking, it seems like the person doing has to make a physical. Like Vader always puts his hand out like that. Do you have to? Is that something you have to do, or can you just look at somebody and say like, "I'm choking you. I'm choking."
That is stage directions to David Prowse, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure it was, but I'm just looking at more of the actual.
We see Palpatine throw guards around without making a gesture. He just walks past them and they just go wham. So there's the capacity exists, but we only see that in the cartoons. I think Vader has a flair for the dramatic, and I think even if Kirshner hadn't been telling him to do that, I think Vader would have made that move.
Yeah.
Because otherwise he's just choking, right? Like people don't really know what the force is. If Vader's just standing there implacably and the guy he's arguing with starts choking, we're like, oh, Nita, help! What's happening? What's gone wrong? He must have swallowed a porgag wrong or something. I don't know, but I think it's good cinematography, it's good drama, but that is a good question. I think it's a real power move to be able to pull that sort of thing off without making a gesture.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
I think also, I mean, with this movie, you definitely get a lot more of, you get to see the friendship between Luke and Han. You kind of, started in A New Hope, and here it's evolved to the point where Han is willing to risk his life to go out and save his friend.
Also, we see the first use of the word hell in Star Wars.
Yes, first, yes.
I'm interested to know what cultural significance that has in a Corellian upbringing. What is hell to a Corellian?
I don't know.
It's a very good question. I could imagine.
And I think the joke I make is these movies aren't actually in English; they're in Galactic Basic. We're just hearing the translation, so who knows what word Han really said, right?
Yeah. It does have one of the deleted scenes is one of my favorite deleted scenes in all of Star Wars. It's the one where the Imperials are invading Echo Base, and there's the door with all the Wampas behind it that C-3PO opens and closes and tears down the sign saying "Do not enter," and the stormtroopers walk by.
What were those Wampas? What are those Wampas doing there?
What's funny is the reaction of the other stormtroopers when the one stormtrooper gets pulled in and the door closes. They're just like, "No, never mind."
I love moments like that. I had forgotten about that scene. I love moments like that where we see stormtroopers behaving the way I know military people to behave. Like in The Mandalorian, when we see the two scout troopers just kind of shooting the breeze, standing around talking trash. That's exactly what troops do on guard.
Yeah.
What did that sign say? Was it like Wampa Storage Facility 202? Like
I wouldn't. I don't.
Hold on, let me look it up.
Why is there a room full of Wampas on Echo Base?
Why? Why not?
It's not a complaint. I'm legitimately concerned or curious what those Wampas, what purpose they serve. Are they all walking on a giant treadmill to generate power?
So I did a search here. It says in Empire Strikes Back, the sign on the Wampa room simply reads Wampa. It's a clear, large, and easy identifiable label indicating the presence of the creature within the ice cave where Luke Skywalker is trapped.
I do remember there was I don't
Wait,
remember if it was a comic or something where they just arrived at Echo Base and they're going through and they find the Wampas and they realize like, oh, these things are already here. And then they did a thing where they could like keep them separated, like keep the Wampas there so they wouldn't get into the rest of the base. So the Wampa, it wasn't that they just kept Wampas there. It was like the Wampas were already there.
that makes more sense.
Well, crap.
I have this image of a bunch of rebel troops like herding Wampas into this room with a broom. Yeah, get in there. I liked the addition of the Tauntaun, which I did not know until recently was actually a reptile within the canon of the series.
It's a reptile mammal because, I mean, reptiles can't grow hair.
Because space.
Well, no, but genetics. Reptiles cannot by nature grow hair, so it's a reptomammal. So it's some kind of bridging species between reptiles and mammals. I really liked it. I think that was cool. It was one of my earliest memories of watching Star Wars is being grossed out by all the tubes inside it when they cut it open.
Oh yeah, and of course, as you know, they smell worse on the inside.
Everyone knows this,
as most things do.
Yes.
I mean, everything I've ever been inside of. Hey-o!
I'm what?
Wait,
so many jokes right themselves.
That didn't come out quite right.
Just let it go.
I like the fact
I'm going to say
I'm looking for things I love about Empire. So looking for things I love about Empire. I love the exchange between Han and Leia when she says "I love you," and he says "I know."
Yeah,
iconic. Yes. And am I remembering correctly? That was actually an ad lib by Harrison Ford. That's not.
It was.
That wasn't how the script read.
I think. Yeah, I think because he talked in an interview. He talked about how the director wanted him to say some sappy line. He's like, "Wait a minute, that's not what Han Solo would say." Like,
no.
He looked at the Han Solo character. He's like, "That's not what Han would say." What's the most basically a-hole thing? Not a-hole thing, but like just knowing his character that he would say is like,
what's the most nonchalant thing he can say without coming off like a complete jerk?
Yeah, and I know, which is so great in Jedi when Leia turns it around on him, and because he says you have the same thing where Han says "I love you," and Leia goes, "I know." But
yeah, and
that's almost when he says that.
They're such a great couple. That is.
Yeah. But yeah, no. When Han
that
says
is the tragedy of the sequels that we don't get to see them happy together.
Yeah, you almost want to see the meme of the glasses coming down over him with the, because that's just such a.
Oh yeah.
Such a cool. Yeah, I know. I love the like the Battle of Hoth itself is such a great, and seeing the first time seeing ground combat in Star Wars with the rebel soldiers. And I do have one question though. If ion cannons and ion bombs are so powerful, because we see it in I just watched Rogue One with my daughter, and in that one the Y-wings use ion bombs, which basically disable an entire starship, just completely knock out its power. So there's no power, no shields, no nothing. It's just dead in space. And we see the same thing. They use the same thing in the Battle of Hoth. They use an ion cannon to disable. Why doesn't the Rebel just fire ion bombs at everything and just take out like every ship with like about 50 Y-wings?
This was the era of filmmaking when they just would throw a science fiction word in front of something else and make it space agey.
Yeah.
There's a show I really like on Hulu called Solar Opposites about aliens living on Earth, and they have all kinds of highly advanced tech, and they just refer to it as sci-fi stuff. Are you going out there doing sci-fi stuff without me? Yeah, you're supposed to do sci-fi stuff with all of us. I like that. But yeah, I was one of that too. Like it's just ion this and hyper that.
Yeah.
It's I don't
Well,
know.
I mean,
I don't know
in
the
the Star Wars canon, the ion cannon is a specific weapon. It's a
just
weapon
the dish
that
one, right?
It's the one that fires the ship.
So here's how it works out. So the blasters are red beams. You've got your stun, which are the ring shaped blue, and then you have the ion blasts, which they're the green ones, and those are the ones that can temporarily knock out the electrical systems. Basically, it's just a targeted EMP beam.
Yeah. But like I know in Rogue One, they used the ion bombs to disable one of the starships, because that's when Radix has the idea of using the Hammerhead Corvette to ram into the other starship and force that starship to ram into the other Star Destroyer and do them into. But my thing was like, well, if these bombs can just, if one or two bombs can just knock out an entire starship's electrical systems and basically render it dead in space, why doesn't it just use you can take out the entire fleet with just like about 100 Y-wings and take out the entire fleet?
Because reasons?
Yeah.
Because
then it would, because then it would be like those memes of the Star Wars movies where someone makes some logical point and it just goes to created by George Lucas.
Right.
Well, we can't let this episode come to a close without bringing up the man, the myth, the legend, Lando Calrissian.
Oh yes.
It's a good thing you did that.
Not since Count Dooku has anyone in Star Wars made a cape work as well.
This is true. And
he's got a collection of capes, as I understand it.
He does. And I like
a lot of the EU books made a lot of hay out of disagreements between Han and Leia, like Han being jealous of somebody who was interested in Leia, and Leia being diplomatically unable to shoot them down, just kind of have to string them along a little bit. And Lando was like the first window we see of that. Well, hello, he's like the space version of how you doing. It's a good moment.
Yeah.
I like Lando. I like Lando a lot.
I like the fact that for at least a good part of that, a good chunk of that movie is very ambiguous as to what side he's on. Like, is he really a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Why did he? It's eventually you get the like, okay, he is a baby. Yeah, he is a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's that point where it's very, very up in the air as to where is his allegiance? Is allegiance to anybody, or is he just for Lando?
His allegiance are to the people of Bethpin, I think.
Yeah.
Like he really took his responsibility as administrator seriously.
Yeah.
I think it's funny that Lando is the one who goes undercover in Jabba's palace and Return of the Jedi. Like, are we doing no background checks whatsoever? Hey, old friend of the guy we just captured, well known. Like, Lando's pretty famous as far as I could tell in the galaxy, and they're like, yeah, sure, come on board.
Being known as one of Han's friends, because if there's no history of him hanging out with Han, aside from, because like as far as we know,
yeah, you're right. You're right.
Says we go way back. What he's referring to is that whole thing with the Kessel Run in Solo. That that
one long weekend 10 years ago,
lost between them.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
But then if there's any kind of interaction between those events, we don't know. But the fact is that we do get. I think having him go in there, especially concerning the fact that he had himself disguised, I don't think anybody was going to.
But wait a minute, he was disguised in the helmet Jabba gave him. Like he was disguised in the Bespin Guard helmet.
true, but he wasn't a known quantity for the Rebel Alliance. He wasn't a known ally of Han Solo.
I guess not. You make a good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
All right, I'll cancel the meme.
Okay. But yeah. I mean, we get a lot of good, I think, character moments, on that trip from Bespin, or from Hoth to Bespin, between Han and Leia. You get the first inkling of what's really going on with the Falcon and the history of there, with would be retconned in later with the line from C-3PO of has a peculiar dialect, which would be retconned in.
But nicely, very nicely
it's
dovetailed
more
in.
classic of the Falcon never
It was
working
done
right.
okay. I mean, it's still Phoebe Waller-Bridge, the human equivalent of a peaceful protest. So I'm not a fan of hers, by the way. She's single.
But yeah, I mean, you get the classic joke of the Falcon never working. Of course, C-3PO having a conniption fit constantly over everything. And
dude, that I think that right there probably that annoyed me more than anything else. Like,
yeah,
it was during, like, it made me realize just how pedantic C-3PO is, and this is nothing against Anthony Daniels for how well he performed the character, but I guess I mean that's great writing if I'm getting annoyed by the character, because he was written to be obnoxious, but it got to the point where I'm just like, can we just blow him out the airlock, please?
Yeah, I think that's why probably pretty much everyone cheered when Leia finally just switches him off.
I've never understood why so many people love him so much.
Yeah. But of course it had probably one of the biggest jump scares, for me at least. And I still, to this day, jump every time the Minoc hits the windshield, whatever it's called, the front of the Falcon. Like, every time it comes up, I'm just like, there's a couple movies that are like that I can watch them several hundred times. Every time in Jurassic Park, every time the Raptor comes in after they've turned on the power, and the Raptors, that's a jump scare for me too, every time. And every time the Minoc hits the windshield on the Falcon.
For me, it's The Breakfast Club. There's a scene in The Breakfast Club when they're all sitting in the library quietly, and it's about 32 seconds of silence, interrupted by Molly Ringwald saying, "Brian," and I always, yeah.
Really? That's not even scary.
I mean, it's not scary. It's just that's something you'd think I would have learned by now. But every time I watch that movie,
that's funny.
Nice.
So okay.
I mean,
let's talk.
Go.
Let's talk. I mean, we're talking about the things that we enjoy the most. Let's talk least favorite scene of the film.
I would like to know why the tree is evil. I think it's grossly underexplained why the tree is bad. It's just like Yoda says, great evil lives there, or something like it just holds darkness. Why?
It's not
why?
The tree, it's a cave.
So, but I would like just a word of explanation why this focus of evil is, a 10-minute walk from Yoda's house. And it's just, it seems kind of out of the blue to me. I like that scene, but I would like to know more about it.
Well, so one of the things that gets described a lot in the previous canon is the fact that different planets are steeped in the dark side, or in the light side. It depends on how the planet itself was formed and how the force flows through it. But Dagobah was known, just like other planets like Korriban and Exegol and other planets in between, for having a strong dark side force. Even Even in Felucia, the fungal planet that we see in Revenge of the Sith leans towards the dark side. As far as a planet,
Swamp's tap for black mana. That's true.
And so, so there's there. It's entirely possible that there's a concentration there, and when it's pulling towards Luke, who is already, because of his connection to Vader and because of everything else going on, he's feeling that pull to the dark side. He starts asking about the dark side, and it's in asking that the dark side itself pulls at him because it's wanting to. There's a vacuum there. With Yoda being present, Yoda is he uses the dark side there, that connection, to hide him and mask his presence. But because he himself is a light side user, it creates a power imbalance on the planet.
Well said. I'll take it. Thanks, Garrett.
I
sure wish they'd said that in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would make it easier, right?
But no, I like it. I'll take your word for it. It is, and the Jedi do traditionally like to build their stuff. Force users like to build their stuff on top of each other. I forget what source I have for this, but I believe the Jedi Temple on Coruscant was built on top of a dark side nexus point or on the site of a temple or something. And then the Emperor built his palace on the ruins of the Jedi Temple. So me first. So
yeah. As far as
that temple sank into the swamp.
Yeah. As far as least favorite scene, I mean, really, other than a few moments, a lot of the scene after a good portion of that part of the movie when they're traveling to Bespin, I think you could have cut a lot of that out and not really, changed anything in the movie, or shortened it down quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is kind of like Brian even said, there's a lot, it's very, very oddly, kind of oddly paced and kind of.
Yeah, it's very slow. It's very drawn out.
Yeah, I think you could have done.
It's a turkey leg. It's all tendon, no meat.
Yeah. And like the whole thing of Boba Fett following them. Like, okay, yeah, it's a cool little trick that they pulled, but I think you could have done that, a little bit differently. And yeah, so I'd say that. What about you, Garrett?
I think probably by far my least favorite scene. It's not really a scene so much as it's a line of dialogue. I want to know who the hell Hobby was and why we should care about Hobby. I mean, we obviously know who Dak is as Luke's co-pilot in the snowspeeder. We don't know who Hobby is. Why is Luke saying, "Hobby, I've been hit"? Makes no sense.
Yeah.
It would have made more sense if he was talking to Wedge.
Yeah. If you said Wedge or
But
I think Brian's is going to be probably close to mine, I'd say. What about you, Brian? Least favorite part?
Least favorite? Yeah, the road trip sections. I don't like. Not that I shouldn't say I don't like. It's a fine movie. A lot of great things happen in it, but Luke's arrival on Bespin to Luke seeing his head in Vader's helmet on Bespin is all useless. Dagobah is all useless tissue to me. I've seen it, I get it, but I don't like the characterization of Yoda. The training montage with Luke does not doesn't move me as perhaps it should, and that's on me. It's not. I'm not saying it's badly made. It's just not for me. And especially in hindsight, I think the movie gets worse the more we know about Jedi training. Now that we've seen the prequels and we know what Yoda was like with younglings, we never hear the word Padawan. We never it's just, it doesn't feel contiguous with what we know Yoda to be. Yoda did this. He was a trainer for 700 years. I don't see any of it. I guess he's doing the best he can with what he's got, but it just doesn't click with me. The whole Dagobah scene.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense because it feels out of place and disconnected from what we know of Yoda
Jedi
from other content.
Yeah. It feels like he's been alone too long on Dagobah, smoking that Dagobah dynamite. It's done him in, and he comes back to it a little bit, like we see more of it, but it doesn't feel like. I didn't care for Yoda in the original trilogy. I like him a great deal more in the prequels.
I think what this movie answers is later on when and especially with the new canon, the Disney canon, and there's I can't remember what book it is, but there's one where the Force Ghost of Anakin appears to Leia, and Leia basically in no uncertain terms says, "I want nothing to do with you." And I think this movie, of course, what she went through in A New Hope, but also in this movie, really reiterates why she would feel this way because of what Vader did to Han, and why Luke has such a different view than Leia would.
They talk about that in the Princess Leia novel.
Yeah.
Bloodline.
Yeah, that was the one.
That only Luke knows that Vader turned back to the light at the end.
Yeah.
And he isn't exactly an objective observer. A lot of people believe that he was just making up a story to defend his father and try to preserve his father's legacy.
Yeah.
But Leia was drummed out of the Galactic Senate when they found out that Vader was her father. Yeah. Why she's a general and not a senator when we see her in the sequel.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. I can imagine it must be disappointing to muster up whatever energy you need to manifest as a Force ghost, and the person you're calling is not available.
Yeah.
That's always problematic.
But I love the meme that I've seen before of the when Han comes into the dinner party, and it said something about the effect of here Lord Vader made this beautiful spread of beautiful dinner for his daughter and his boyfriend, and Han Solo comes in blasting.
I like the one. It's a similar scene when Vader it's like Vader must be like, who is this guy? Like out of nowhere he shows up with my son, my daughter, my old droid, like my other old droid. Like everybody important in Vader's life is hanging out with Han Solo.
Yeah, of course. There's the I think it's the robot chicken scene with the "I am your father" and Vader says, "And there's more." He's like, "I am your father." He's like, "That's not true. That's impossible." It's like, "Oh, and there's more."
He tells them the whole story.
C-3PO. It's like that's improbable.
That's a good one.
We should do like. I gotta go. Yeah, it's not that he was trying to get away. He's just like, I'm just tired of listening to this, and throws himself.
We should do a review of the Family Guy Star Wars episode.
Yeah. Oh yes, like after we get through Rise of Skywalker.
Right. Yes. Blue Harvest. Yes.
I haven't watched those in forever.
Oh man.
I think for me the best scene in all of those is when Luke comes back and finds that the Empire has killed his uncle and aunt. But then he also turns around and sees that they've also killed the John Williams Orchestra. And he's like, John Williams! And then he says, I guess we'll have to make do with Danny Elfman. And then like, and
then he cuts him off with a lightsaber.
Yeah.
John Williams!
Yeah. But no, that is, that's an iconic, that was the first, I would say, that was the first true lightsaber battle that we got. I mean, yes, we
Mhm.
got the thing in the Death Star between Obi-Wan,
Yeah,
but this was the first true, like, these two are trying to, well, Vader's not really trying to kill Luke, but this,
But he was trying to wound him as severely as possible.
yeah.
because Vader has some experience with that being a good way to be in to hang around on the dark side.
Yeah.
I have a theory that Luke's his secret force power is that nobody ever really wants to kill him. That's why
Storm armor, Brian.
Well, yes, but will work with me within the canon, because the only people who make a legitimate effort to kill Luke are Jabba, who tells him up front, "Your Jedi mind tricks don't work on me," and Jabba drops him on a Rancor. Anybody else, if Jabba was any other character in the saga, he'd be like, "Join me, like be in my cantina," like they all want him to be on their team. But no, to sum up my feelings for Empire, it's not an exciting film for me. It is, of course, vital to the story, introduces major plot points and major character arcs, and it is the first appearance of the Emperor. So I'll give it. I give it a C on its own, a B compared to the prequels, A+ compared to the sequels.
I think that's fair.
Okay. I'd give it 3.5 Wampas.
On a scale of how many rooms full of Wampa?
On a scale of 5 Wampas, 3.5.
What is the collective noun for Wampas, I wonder?
I think
Wampai?
it's Wampas.
Wampai?
No, but like a herd of cows, a flock of seagulls, a business of ferrets, I don't know, room.
I don't know. I would say a growl of Wampas.
A closet of Wampas.
A closet of Wampas.
Yes.
That's canon. Put it in. That's canon.
Yes, it is.
Oh,
my God.
man.
That was good.
Well, we're coming up on an hour, so
I think it's a film that deserved an hour.
We've had a lot to say about the greatest film in the saga, so despite Brian's opinions.
As always, my opinions are not to be taken as any more important than anyone else's.
Yeah. Well, Garrett, what are we talking about next week?
Next week, we are going to be talking about smuggler lore as we are jumping back into another lore episode. I'm looking forward to it because it's a conversation we really haven't talked about, but it does give us a chance to talk about a smuggler that has been mentioned a few times on the show, but we've never really gotten to dig into him or his organization. That is
Han Solo. Oh, right.
We've already established that Han Solo is terrible at being a smuggler.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we're going to be tackling.
I'm looking forward to that. I think Hondo is the best smuggler. Nobody ever remembers that he's evil. They're like, he won't betray us this time.
Well, is
Hondo?
But that's the question, though. We can get into is Hondo a smuggler or is he a pirate? And what's the difference?
Yes,
he's an entrepreneur.
He provides jobs, John.
That's right.
He's a job creator.
He's a tour guide at Galaxy's Edge too. You gotta give him credit.
There you go.
I'm looking forward to that one.
A lot of fun. Well, Brian, as we wrap up there, why don't you tell the fine folks in the internet land where they can find you at?
Hi, fine folks in internet land. Why don't you come see me at the Sith Library and Archives, a lovingly curated and collected assembly of art, culture, jokes, and literature regarding the Sith traditions. And we lean into the Empire or the First Order, pretty much anything. If they're the bad guys, if it's an antagonist, we've got something for you. So come on by here. I'm actually just started a new series of lectures on Sith culture and history. So come on by and see us. I posted as Darth Korosis, famously the only thing I wrote in 8th grade that I still like.
Nice. What about you, Garrett?
Well, you guys can find me on Instagram and X at GKJ_publishing, where I talk about my show the right way on YouTube. If you want to search for that, just look for GKJ Publishing as well. I also talk about my books, The Archives of Async Ran. It's a 5-book series currently. And the first book in that series, The Heirs of Menenius, actually makes its 10th anniversary next week. So on February 3rd, it'll be officially 10 years old. I also have another book coming out later in February, on February 17th. It's called Midnight Playground. It is a collection of short stories, various genres. And then I also co-host another Feast of Fandoms podcast. It's a once-a-monther that is called Snackame, where we talk about food and anime.
Nice. All right. As for us right here, of course, if you want to get a hold of the show, you can do so through our email. It is warthestars1@gmail.com. Our Instagram is at war_of_the_stars1. We are on X at warthestars1 and YouTube at WOTS77, where you can find backlogs of most of the old episodes of War of the Stars. If you want to go back and watch some of our old episodes there. You can also check me on a new podcast I'm doing with a good friend of mine, Keith Staples. It is the Mark and Keith podcast, where me and him, we go back and reminisce about the old days growing up in the late 80s, early 90s in the Midwest, and some of our adventures. We've done a couple episodes. It's a lot of fun doing that. If you want to support the show, Ko-fi.com/War of the Stars, or go to our Spreadshirt shop, spreadshirt.com/shop/war-of-the-stars-. Okay. With that being said, I believe that is everything we have. Oh, yes, of course. Right there. We are, of course, on Feast of Fandoms, proud member of Feast of Fandoms. Check out all the shows on Feast of Fandoms. And in just a few weeks, I think it's next week, is officially Star Wars Podcast Day, which we will be celebrating by doing our episode on smugglers. But more information on that coming up. We're going to be part of almost 200, I believe, other podcasts are going to be a part of it. Celebrating the first ever Star Wars podcast way back almost 20 years ago. So that'll be a lot of fun. We are a part of that. We're always a part of that for the last 6 years, and it's always fun to do that. With that being said, thank you all for watching and listening. And as always, remember, this is not just my Star Wars. This is not just your Star Wars. This is our Star Wars. Until next week, may the Force be with you.